Hello, everybody. Welcome to our 20-second talk for this week. With me today, I have two great guests that I've been dying to have on, and I've sort of been hyping it up for past streams. But with me today, I have the co-founder and creator of MOCA, Museum of Crypto Art COLBORN, and a great artist in the space, and a figure spearheading one of the super rare spaces, Metafiesca, I believe, Carlos Marcial. You'll notice this intro is recorded before. It's a pre-recorded intro. That's because we all just jumped into the conversation immediately, and I forgot to record the intro. Even by the time I started speaking, I completely forgot about it. But the recording starts with Colburn. I believe Colburn and Carlos are talking about my NFT Miami, or what is it, Art Basel in Miami that just happened. Hopefully, you guys enjoy this one. And
Oh, go ahead. No,
No,
please.
no, you go ahead. No, you
I
go
was just gonna say, like, you're not missing much here, man. You
Okay,
know,
okay.
yeah, it
Why is
was
that?
like, well, it's it's something maybe we can touch on too, but like, um, it for me, like the NFT scene did not translate well down here,
mm,
right?
Mm,
And I don't know, like it really made me question like what would even the future of crypto art look like in a traditional fine art collector scene, and I don't really even begin to think that they should or can exist together. But I think just as like blockchain cryptocurrency is parallel financial architecture, that crypto art should be like a totally separate and parallel art architecture to like the traditional contemporary art world.
mm. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And for me,
Absolutely.
yeah, for me,
Mm,
it's like it just comes down to the way it's being displayed, and like
right.
nobody did it well, in my opinion.
mm,
And
Mm-hmm.
frankly, like when you see these beautiful physical artworks next to like Samsung TV screens that people bought at like Best Buy, you're like,
Yeah.
well,
mm.
this really, it really actually cheapens the value and quality of the work, because we're designing for like a visual experience in crypto art that is just not accessible really with the current technology.
Mm-hmm. Don't you think, like, for example, I'm getting invited to exhibit in Seoul in South Korea, and
Mm.
it's and the whole thing it's gonna be set up by this amazing group
Yeah,
of designers called District, and they do like these massive displays, and the way they're thinking about it is kind of like making it more immersive. So it's
yep,
kind of like the digital art is not limited to the rectangle or to the square,
yep,
because when you think about it, it's digital. Like it could be projected, and it could be mounted, and it could be showcased in so many different ways, right?
yeah,
And I think our imagination still is kind of like too limited, right? And I agree with you. Like if we stay too close to like the traditional art world with all their conservativeness, I don't
yep,
know if that's a word, but I'm inventing words here. I don't think we're going to, may be able to break out of that fucking mold, and really present digital art, crypto art in the
yeah,
way it can be presented and
yeah.
showcased,
You're
right?
spot on. It's spot on. Like when you look at like you go to Basel, you look at like a traditional gallery booth next to like an NFT booth. It looks like the younger, like massively immature younger brother,
Right.
or like something that just looks. It doesn't present well in
Yeah.
comparison. But you
Yeah.
go to like a major digital installation like something at Super Blue, and you're blown away. And
Right. Right.
I met with those guys doing that South Korea project. Like that is it, like get people into the spaces, experiencing digital artwork in new ways.
Mm.
Because like I'm not going to go like buy a Samsung TV and put my NFTs up on that. Like I stare at screens all day. I'm not trying to
Right.
just like stare at another bigger, bright screen in my house and be like,
Right.
okay, now like this is the artwork that I love. Because frankly, yeah, I don't know, there was just like a tactileness, a physicality to the
But
artwork that
don't,
was
don't,
nice.
don't, don't you think we're kind of like, you remember like in the early iPhone epoch. Like we had like skeuomorphism. So it
Yeah.
was like the app designers were trying to create this like literal translation of like how things look in the real world. And don't you think we're just like in that stage? And eventually, hopefully, we'll move out of that stage.
Yeah, I think so. Like, we need to begin to, yeah, everybody says it, but we really are incredibly, incredibly early. And like pioneers, the artists, like, saw so much further of what this could be. And then, like, when I begin to tackle, like, how I want these things to be experienced, like, I think the museum in the beginning was incredibly popular because it was a new and novel and like push of the aesthetic of like how to experience these things. Um, and but like, you know, these metaverse worlds, they catch up all the time, they evolve, they grow, and like how to continue to stay on the forefront of what that best experience is and creatively like envision it for the future is so high on my mind.
I'm here for like the long run. I'm not gonna
Yeah.
stop making crypto art until people can see my art with the Neuralink.
Yes, exactly.
There you go.
Exactly. Just like,
Yeah, I mean, completely honest. You know, like I'm not gonna stop until we get there, and I'm
yeah.
able to directly, be able to, to connect with people's brains and give them all this aesthetic experience. You know,
Yeah.
it's gonna be better than fucking acid and mushrooms. You know, it's gonna be.
Totally. Totally.
I mean, maybe
Totally.
if you eat some mushrooms before you plug in and start seeing my experience, maybe it just takes you to a whole different place, you know.
Yeah.
But I won't stop until we get there, you know. And I agree with you. We were gonna get there. We're gonna move on. Right
Yeah.
now, I think we're like piggy writing on like the traditional art world because it gives
Yeah.
us like cultural cachet, you know,
Yes.
and
Yeah.
and that's it is what it is, you know.
Yeah.
So, mm-hmm.
It reminds me a lot of like 2017 when everybody was saying like, oh, you know, like institutions are coming to buy these coins. And like, you know, like the institutions, of course, like never came because they can't come, you know, because there's so much like rules and regulations around it. And it's like,
Right.
you know, people probably say similarly, like, oh, traditional art world collectors are going to come and they're going to get it. And I go to this thing and I'm like, no, they're not, because
Right.
it doesn't look better in the format that we're presenting it. Nobody wants like a TV screen in their house on all like the time. Doesn't matter like what the user interface is. Like that painting in a home will look better, but this digital art in your own world, however you begin to experience that, and I think we see glimpses of that in like the VR headset.
Right.
But you're right. Like these images need to go like direct into the brain, like shared experiences, all of us together, like
Yeah.
walking through an infinity room, like having this
Yeah.
conversation.
Yeah. And it's gonna happen. It's gonna happen. I'm
It
pretty
is.
sure. Yeah, it might. It's gonna take whatever time it needs to take. But we're building that. We're in that process of like interfacing in new ways with technology and the computer, right? Like I think Apple is like ready. Probably, at least I read that. And somewhere recently that they're gonna like make the put out the first prototype for like AR glasses.
Yeah.
I know Google tried it, but who's better than Apple to to make a bigger dent and impact on some of these things. So we're super early. We're super early. We're gonna
Yeah.
find new ways, and I think the interesting thing is like humans will bring culture to wherever they go. If we go to
Mm,
Mars, we're gonna take culture with us. If we go to
mm,
other galaxies, we're gonna take our culture with us. If we go into the metaverse, we're gonna take culture with us. You
yeah.
know,
Yeah.
that's really
Because,
interesting. Mhm. Go ahead.
yeah, I think just like frankly, that's what will continue to keep us human as more and more things get automated,
Yeah,
right? And
yeah,
like the ability of like the like a physical labor or whatever that like additive human economic value that is being valued, like suddenly that transforms more and more to like creative and cultural, because like I do believe that the machines will continue to like take jobs and make people perhaps like obsolete in the ways that they used to work in the past.
Oh yeah, it's
You
already
know,
happening. Yeah,
absolutely.
and I think, I mean, I remember like I think it was Naval. I don't know how to pronounce this. Ravi Kanat, something like that. He was asking like, what's gonna happen to humanity once everything gets automated? And I think his answer was, super short and sweet. He just said art. We
Mhm.
might, like if that gets resolved, and obviously we all share in that economy where robots produce everything, and
Yeah.
we'll need to figure out like what how people like UBI and that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But if that kind of things happen, like UBI, what are you gonna do with all the time that you have available for you?
Exactly.
I hopefully I believe people are just gonna like write more poetry.
Mm.
They're gonna
Yeah.
compose more music. They're gonna tap into NFTs and try it out and try to see, like, they've always wanted to be visual artists. So I'm hoping for that.
Yeah.
You know.
Are
Mm-hmm.
are we recording?
Well, so I started recording already because
Great.
y'all jumped into this because I mean this is great. This is already great, and you guys touched on a really great topic. This has been an issue in the space, and I've been noticing it. Colbert and Shivani, you guys brought it up in the Mint MTL, and you just talked about it now, where it's like the space and some of the shortcomings in the physical and the digital world, right? And how that translates. And so, to me, it's like that's a really big issue that needs to be tackled. But also, to the point of your culture, right? It's we're starting to sort of mess with the idea of location and identity and how to bring the identity tied to certain
Mm,
locations into the metaverse, right? And
mm.
what that means to the virtual unchangeable space. And to me, that has far more reaching implications than just like like the first layer of aesthetic art, right?
Yeah. I
Carlos,
mean,
go ahead.
well, I was gonna say, just like think of how beautiful it is that like this community gathered around Carlos and the Metaphysica space, and the announcement that the first show was going to be like a Latin American, like show for women, correct?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Oh,
Yeah,
Correct. Mm-hmm.
and think about like how powerful that is as like one of the first introductions of culture into this space, like into these
exactly.
worlds. And I always go back to this thought, like for me, the
Mm,
crypto art at its core is that suddenly we have this like open, permissionless network. Call it Ethereum, call it Tezos, call it whatever protocol it is, that
Uh-huh.
allows for like the global onboarding and uploading of creativity that generally did not exist or was not seen
mm,
outside of like the vacuum of the physical location that it existed in.
yeah.
Mm-hmm. That's why
and
I'm here.
and
That's why I was
Exactly.
able to become an artist and live off my art. I wouldn't been able to do any of the things that I've done. And if NFTs hadn't come, I would have, like, if that's really what I wanted to do, like tap
mm,
into like the art world. I would have needed necessarily to move to like New York,
mhm,
London, maybe Paris,
Right.
and who knows, I might be still like waiting tables at some place in New
mhm,
York, right? So the fact that I was able to do the things that I've done from Mexico City, from the third world, without having to move yet to any of these like bigger cities. I think it's mind blowing. It's really revolutionary. I mean, we were talking about like the aesthetics shortcomings
mm,
of like how we present crypto art in the real world. But then we move on to like talking about like the decentralized, permissionless access to cultural capital and
Yeah.
royalties and
mm,
smart contracts and fucking provenance that lives on the blockchain forever. And it's like, okay, then resolving the how we present the crypto art, we're gonna figure that out. We're gonna figure that out. But right now we figure out some like really revolutionary things already. Won't you agree with me, Colborn?
I tell people all the time that the museum is not like a physical thing or a place that you go or something that exists in the metaverse. And yes, it is. But more importantly, it's the idea that that thing exists and that thing is like valuable and will grow and evolve and will change like with the space. You know, we're entering like an exponential period of technological growth, and we have to teach humans and institutions not to be like static in their power structure, but to be open to change and flatter and like respond with the dynamism of the moment. And that is like the immediate cultural zeitgeist, like this path that we're on, and you know, kind of like the waves of that exponential journey upwards. So, which is why, like, again, like the physicality of it, how it is now, is actually totally irrelevant to like the ideas and the philosophy. And that's why I was like so excited to talk with you both, because you both see that and you both get it and you both express it so eloquently that I would love to like continue to stay in that realm of, you know, what is the philosophy of the grand vision, and not like what are the, you know, immediate shortcomings of the display, but and this is I'm gonna just keep going on, sorry.
No, dude, you
Yeah,
got me captivated. Go ahead.
Talk your shit.
My mind is getting fed right now.
I mean, this is what excited me in 2017 about like ICOs and coins, because suddenly you're creating like a futures market for the economy of ideas, right? And somebody can do something as simple as present a white paper, gather capital from all over the world, and then begin to like reverse engineer how to actually bring it into reality with people that are passionate and care and are invested in like the success of that idea.
Completely agree.
Yeah.
Completely. Yeah. That's a beautiful way of putting it. Exactly. Like we have the grand vision already. I think the ones that are that been here, for a little while already, like we at some point we sort of like got it right, and we're kind of like reverse engineering to the future, and trying to
Exactly.
right. Like I completely agree with you, man. Completely. And I like what you said about like the Museum of Crypto Art not being like a physical space, because it reminds me. I don't know who said it. Some not long ago, like he believes that the metaverse is not a place, but it's a time in history.
Mm,
I'll just make a bridge, right? Like I think the Museum of Crypto Art, it's a time in the history of art more than a place,
yeah.
right?
And it's I liked that word too, like a bridge to get people to understand the idea of kind of what is happening. And also perhaps like even pose more questions than present answers. And I think that
Right.
also, of course, simultaneously is like the purpose of art, and like the collective body of crypto art is to kind of present the question of like what is the transhuman narrative, and to really like work together to flesh out the ideas and ideals that we are so very rapidly like evolving into.
Right, right. I mean, I like you said rapidly, because this is just like too exponential. I agree
Yeah.
with you, and it's like even for myself that I've been here, but it's like I was recording a video for a hackathon that is going on in Puerto Rico right now with
Mm,
the money conference, the metaverso. And I was just kind of like telling the participants like how crazy it was to like I got in, I minted my first NFT, and I thought, okay, this is okay. I'm just doing this because this is fun, and like my intellectual curiosity, it's making me, be part of this, even though I don't have, the remote. I don't have any idea of where this is going, and then it only took 1 year to see it, like quickly, so quickly, exponentially move forward. And I think, and that's good, but it also it can be worrisome in some aspect of it, because it means that it's going to happen so fast that a lot of people are not going to be able to know how to jump in, or how to, like, make the best out of it, or you know what I mean. So I like the
Yeah.
idea of culture, like, I think that's what you were trying to say. I'm just trying to kind of like build another bridge to what you were saying. It's
Yeah.
like culture, throughout history has served that purpose of kind of like explaining, to a wider audience, maybe, what's really going on.
Mhm.
So I think that's why it's so important for us to be here, kind of like at the cultural forefront of Web3, of the metaverse, omniverse, however you want to call it, hmm
And, and this is I think is like, I just want to talk about this moment, if you'll allow me.
Mhm.
Um, One, it's kind of like, we have to also, because we are experimenting on the bleeding edge, we also have to be open and accepting that, like, we will all continue to make mistakes,
Mhm.
and we will all continue to, like, experiment, or we should be allowed to make mistakes, and we should be allowed to ask for forgiveness, and we should
hmm
be allowed to take, like, creative
Mhm.
risks that push, like, ourselves outside of the box. And I don't know why this moment came to me, but it did, because,
yeah,
like, like, Carlos, you are so
yeah.
known for, like, those incredible infinity rooms, and they're just, like, so captivating and mesmerizing. And you
Mhm.
did, like, the nifty gateway drop of the Jaguar, and those beautiful pieces
Yeah,
that were so tied to the heritage. But then
yeah.
you just, like, you went out and you did, the next thing you did was, like, a conceptual piece
Mhm.
on Bitcoin, right?
hmm hmm
and
hmm
and and that was, like, so different and brave. And I was like, this is, like, so amazing to see that, like, this is not an artist in a box, but this
Mhm.
is an artist that is, like, unlocked and free.
Yeah,
Uh,
thank you,
uh,
man. I mean, that's what NFT has brought to me, like that kind of freedom of like being able to experiment. And obviously, I mean, I'm not gonna be completely naive about the feedback that I get from the markets, obviously.
Sure.
But I try to embrace that. And when I talk to other artists, it's like, you know what, like, embrace it, because what the market, like, having that direct contact with the markets, they're just, it's information, it's data, they're just telling you something,
Yeah.
but I agree with you, like, who cares, like, do whatever you want to do, let the markets, let the collectors, let everybody else decide, and like in anything else in the history of art, it might be like nobody cared about it now, and
Yep.
then, you know what, in 100 years everybody's gonna be talking like, wow, this was it. This was like the best crypto art thing that was ever done.
Yep.
So yeah, we should be able, and I like the narrative of kind of like being able to experiment, to make mistakes, to ask for forgiveness, to do all those kind of things.
Mhm.
This is a whole different place from the like the traditional art world. I would like to think where like it's like, oh, you messed up this relationship with this collector and like you're done,
Yeah.
and you're not gonna
Absolutely.
get into any of, like, the New York galleries or whatever. You know what I mean?
Right.
Um,
Well,
Exactly.
the
and
fact that this is decentralized and that it's global, it should give us a little bit more leeway to experiment. Absolutely. Thank you for bringing that up, man.
and
Totally.
Of course. Yeah.
and it also, to the point, I need to congratulate both of you guys for winning the space race, because again, people don't understand how foundational that space race is, and the two spaces and what you guys represent means. Because for so long, right, in the art side itself, you've had to go through channels where you had to either morph your ideas or put them in a box, right, to fit to a certain type of curator, right. Carlos, you
Mm.
mentioned, right, there is the potential going through the fine art world. You have to go, either to New York, Miami, London, all these places where the big collectors and the big institutions are. And that's
hmm
been the case for years, right? And that's a subject that we aim to tackle, like the art historians in universities aim to tackle, where it's like, how do we bring in more of the unheard, right? Like the unseen gaze, because we've been seeing art distilled through a certain gaze. And
Yeah.
now here comes this space that allows for, no fuckery from like certain galleries, no messing with the work, none of that, and then
Mm.
allows and gives the curator and also the corrector, your own terms and your own power to meet each other, and there is no like power play. And on top of that, like you, Carlos, in your spaces, you're allowed to essentially bring up and introduce art and allow people to see art from your point of view and from from Puerto Rican and Mexican and Latin Americans' point of view, from their point of view, and MOCA is able to represent and stand for their point of view as well. And there is no, fake play in between and no fake politics where it's like, oh, I have to fit in and we have to play this role, right? And that changes the art world completely, because now both of you have the power and essentially become recorders of history that can stand time, that won't get erased, won't get played around with, and will coexist and come in dialogue with each other, and that's very important.
Let's fucking go. Let's fucking go. You gotta be pumped. Yeah. Go ahead, Colbert.
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, the most beautiful thing to me was reading all of the like Twitter comments where people were like, I voted for Museum of Crypto Art and Metaphysica, right? and they were drawing this line between like the work that we're doing, and for me that was exceptionally beautiful, right? Like there is a crypto art thread, and it kind of goes back to what we were talking about earlier, but like we have a massive wealth creation event in cryptocurrency, right? We have very clear like early patrons who did well in cryptocurrency, but they care about crypto art as it speaks to crypto culture, right? And we come from a culture that in the mainstream media is so demonized, right? But like the most beautiful human ideals in this like transition away from Web 2.0 into where we're going, whether it is like, for me, like self-sovereignty is a big one, like right to privacy, ownership of data, and then again, like the power of an open access permissionless network for anybody to begin to use. These are, like Carlos, are putting a visual language to crypto culture that is transforming and speaking to the mainstream in a way that is driving cryptocurrency adoption, which, and I know Carlos is incredibly passionate about this, but like rejects an incredibly like elitist global like colonial based economic system, whether it's World Bank or IMF or whatever, these like deep pocketed moneyed institutions that used that like power over control of capital to exert influence over other lesser like weaker nation states. Like we need to just remove all of this, flatten it down, and suddenly we are just like people on one world again together,
exactly,
in this new paradigm.
Yeah, it's fucking beautiful, man. Fucking beautiful. Yeah, and I think what's cool about, like, just to add to what you just said, it's like with crypto, it's being done with money and the access to capital and the access to being able to invest and to have financial freedom and to be sovereign in that sense. And like people tend to forget that we still have, but I think that's where we stand now, as part of like the crypto art movement, where like culture serve, more or less the same function, like you have like the hardware, which was kind of like the money, and then the software is it's culture, right? You cannot have colonialism without obviously kind of like you can have like hard colonialism, right? Where you go and you just colonize some place, but then you have cultural colonialism, right? And you just, and it can be sometimes even more powerful than the old hard colonialism. Like cultural colonialism, the colonialism through ideas, through ideology. And I think the interesting thing is like people don't tend to like realize like how that happens, because it's more abstract, it's more ethereal. But we in crypto art are just, are doing that. We're breaking that, power structure and trying to make it more horizontal, right, and giving more access
Mm.
to cultural capital to people from Bolivia, from
Mhm.
Argentina, Mexico, Zimbabwe, wherever it might be, like the middle of the states, I've talked to artists and they're like, it's crazy that I'm in, I don't know, like Wisconsin, Milwaukee, whatever they might be, and it's like I can do my shit from here, from kind of like the middle of nowhere. They didn't have to go to like LA or New York to be able to participate in the art world and the art markets, and that's crazy, man. That's fucking
Yeah.
beautiful. That's what I talked to like a Cuban guy not long ago from Santiago, which is like the
Mm.
other side of Cuba, of the island. And if you think like the artists in Havana have it like rough and difficult, yeah, at least they're kind of like the cultural center of Cuban culture, right? So
Mm.
if you're at least in
Mm.
La Habana, you're kind of like you're okay. You might have a chance, to do something relevant culturally. But if you're in Santiago, which is on the other side of the island, it's like you don't exist, as an
Mm.
Mhm.
artist. And to hear this guy, tell me like I'm selling crypto art from Santiago, it's like saying fuck you to the cultural institutions in Havana,
Mm.
and seeing all that crumble in front of my eyes, like all this cultural power
Mhm.
structure constantly being crumbled and tear apart in like in the places that you wouldn't expect it, like Cuba. It's crazy, it's beautiful, it's surreal. It's like why would I have chosen, well, I didn't choose to live in this era, but why would I see people like nostalgic for the past, like I would have loved to live in like the 30s. Like, no, man, I'm happy with this ancient era because I'm seeing these things and I can understand them and I can appreciate them, right?
Mm.
So yeah, I wouldn't have chosen any other era to be alive, honestly.
And yeah, and just like expanding on that, not only did you have to be an artist in those cities you mentioned, but that's where all the museums are. That's where like cultural
Mhm.
capital was centered, like the Louvre, the Metropolitan, like
Mhm,
and there you have art that is kind of taken or
Mhm.
stolen from all parts of the
mhm,
world and
mhm,
assembled, and that is like it's a theft of culture,
Mm.
right?
mhm,
And like the concepts that I love to play with is like, how do I create the art as a like public good for anybody to go into the museum, curate their own selection, and then bring it to wherever they are in the world, so that the culture of the world moves across the world, and anybody, say in wherever it is, like Nairobi, with any sort of display technology, can just
Mm.
take
mhm.
that image, save that image, and talk about what artists are doing, like in Mexico City,
Right, right,
where
right,
they
right.
would never have had like the access to be able to see and
Yeah.
experience what that person is doing and feeling and translating into like their creative self-expression.
Yeah,
And
yeah, yeah.
it's
Sorry, go
I
ahead, Anois.
no, I mean it's perfect what Colburn stated, because I had a weird experience in university where it was, you know it's a problem in the fine art world that crypto art solves, right? Where it's identity and the freedom of identity expression, political thought, political expression from your home without having to fit a certain narrative or play a certain games or try to even allocate for certain capitals. Because in my own university experience, it's like I would sit in front of professors, right, and they would talk about colonialism and all of that. And when you would start to question some stuff or bring up some issues that you would have on the advancements on or how the art world it would advance, you would get sort of the undertone of, oh, little poor boy, little brown
Mhm,
boy. You feel me? And it's
mhm,
like when
mhm.
you see it, and it's like it's sort of, again, to Carlos's point, right? Colonialist thought masquerading as a savior thought, where it's like we
Mm-hmm.
still we still know what's
Mm-hmm.
best for you, and it's
Mm-hmm.
like when you ask them, well, then why won't you give me the platform? They'd say, I would, right? I
Mm-hmm.
would, but they wouldn't. Right? It's like I
Right.
mean, in
Mhm.
for like certain professors, example, I know you're not gonna quit your job until you get your tenure, like that's a fact, right? And so,
Yeah.
and like in museums, I know you're not gonna quit your gallerist positions or your curator position until you get your certain goals, right? And
Yeah.
I'm not about to play by your goals, right? It's I need to play by my goals to achieve the same creative genius your creative genius is achieved, right?
Yeah.
And so
I'm
to both of your points, it's like you MOCA again, right? And it's like you've given access to artists that would have like robbed Max Osiris, right? And collecting Carlos's work, Ferocious's work, right? And even Carlos, your work itself being the sort of like head-on attack on like financial structures and even like the political financial system and its political stance on the global system, like that wouldn't have been allowed to happen because it doesn't fit the mainstream culture in the fine art world. It's too
yeah.
strong and it hits too many foundational pillars that it would just take out these institutions, and they don't want it, and they've kept it at bay for so long, and here comes this tech that just gives it to you in your hand and says go, right? And I think that's the best thing about it as well.
I mean, yeah. It's my mind's exploding. Like, first of all, let me just like let me start and say, like, like steal art from MOCA. Like right click, save as all the art in the world that you want. Like that art is yours because it should be shared and it should be said, and it's such like a good and powerful meme. But I love the idea that people can like take the art of the museum and feel ownership of that and feel connected to it, and that it can just be like theirs to do as they please. That to me is very cool. And then like another thing, that we've talked about in the past, Anubis, is like what was happening in Egypt, and that's maybe like a totally separate topic, and I don't even know if we want to go there.
Oh, we could. That's fine. I have no problem. It's crypto. Like I imagine Carlos has dealt with some of the same problems in either Mexico or Puerto Rico, just politically, and like in just nature of political censorship and just third world countries in general, right?
Oh yeah, definitely. That's been the part of like the cultural history of Latin America, like getting censored. Like I tweeted about that like not long ago. Like that's another thing that's super revolutionary, and I don't think enough people like talk about it. Like once it's on the blockchain, I might like my government might come for me because they don't like what I've been saying. But the art they're not gonna be able to burn. It's out there. And it's gonna be there forever. So in that sense, in that political sense, I think crypto art is super fucking powerful because of that. They might kill the man, but they're not gonna kill the idea. The idea is out there, tokenized on the blockchain.
And there's a
Yeah.
Brazilian artist I love for that, like, and he was super early as well. And I don't know how many people know him. I don't know if you guys would know him, but his name is Nino Artero. And and it's just like the art is so post form and so post aesthetic. It's like somebody went into MS Paint and just like drew the rawest form of the idea of what crypto art should be like at its core. And it's it's like a happy face, like child holding its mother's hand in stick figure and saying like, mama, will the future be decentralized? And I just love like the it's just so message forward and art second. And for me, it's just like crypto art because it almost points to the fact that like anybody could, and it also kind of speaks to like Osinachi's story, right? Like anybody in the world with the tools that they have can create something that is powerful, unique to them, and express an idea and share it from wherever.
Yeah. And if you think about also in the terms of curation, just going back a little bit to like decentralizing curation, just because we both we're lucky enough to be part of like the first superverse space and get a spot. Like in the old world, it was like either you and me, because even me as a Latin American, I could have decided, okay, I'm just gonna be here in Mexico City, where like at least in here in Mexico, that's where like culture centralizes, and we have like a real centralization problem. Like Mexico City is full of museum and like cultural places, but you just go like an hour and a half, outside of the city, and it's like there's nothing. It's like a fucking literal desert, cultural deserts. But people have phones, And that's like what you were saying. There. As long as you have a phone connected to the internet, you can go to MOCA and you can experience, the
Mm,
biggest cultural movement of today. But what I was trying to say is like I don't have to like put a seat here in Mexico City, or you Colborn, you don't have to put a seat and wait for the artist to come to you, because I
mm,
think one of the things that I've been thinking about is kind of like, I want to be able to travel more, especially once, we're, a lot of like the COVID thing subsides, considerably. Um, and I think it's gonna be fun to be a curator on the go, if that makes sense. Like I'm not the guy in New
totally.
York waiting for the artist to come to me. I might become the curator on the go, and I might be, going to the Andes, going to Bolivia, and trying to find
Mhm.
out what's happening, culturally. I'm gonna be the one, excavating all that culture, and I think that's gonna be fun. Colburn, you yourself, you're like just traveling through your
Mm-hmm.
travels, you might be able to discover the next big artist, right? So in that sense, that dynamic changes a whole fucking lot, if that makes sense.
Well,
It,
it reminds me, like, I spent a lot of time with Judy and Bea at Dada,
Mm-hmm. Data.
right?
Uh-huh. Yeah, yeah,
And,
yeah.
and they're like so incredible because, who did they bring to New York? But they brought, like, artists from Venezuela and like
oh
Yeah.
wow.
Peru and like people who had never been to New York before. But here it is, like the opportunity to like afford somebody that is just like playing and having a conversation through art, through the Dada platform, to even begin to like see these things. I mean, so many wonderful examples. Like even the crypto Argentina was so heavily represented at NFT NYC, and for
Mm-hmm.
many it was their first time in New York City.
Yeah.
And like, how is that not one of like the most powerful crypto art stories,
Mm-hmm.
where you have like an economy in free fall, a government in total disarray, like people suffering, and incredible like creative power, and these artists like banding together to like teach each other how to like grow and evolve through this space, but also like
Mm-hmm.
and obviously, Carlos, you're living it, man, like making a
Mm-hmm.
living,
Mm-hmm.
making a
Mm-hmm.
living from this.
Yeah.
um and it does speak to all sorts of things. Like, there's so many good stories of people
Mm-hmm.
that just did it,
It,
that
Yeah.
just did it.
and
uh,
Yeah.
and to your point, right? Art has been present around every big political event, right? Art was present, and one of the big motivators for the French Revolution has been
mm,
utilized. In art gets utilized in every revolution. Legitimately,
Mm-hmm.
it becomes the language of the government, unfortunately, and the language of the people at the same
Of the
time.
people. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
but the biggest difference now is artists at times would have to be at the bay of the government, right? To sort of live, right? The government would grant you your funds and your funding and your
Mm-hmm.
grants or whatever based on what you said, and if it was politically acceptable to their, moralistic point of view at this time, right? And that could change, you're out, right? If you spoke out a little bit too much, you're out.
yeah.
And this tech, you don't even need. It's sort of where it's like to and Carlos, to your earlier point, where it's like you don't need the government in that sense, and so you're free from that. And if something ever happens to you, your thought is still out there. It's no longer controlled
Yeah.
by the government, right? It exists. and,
Yeah.
and also to another point where it's like I remember getting told in university, right? Nobody discovers artists. That discovery idea is long dead. That was a white supremacist idea that was used by and utilized by the Western canon. And I was like, okay, but no, you don't get to play this game. You don't get to use that for your people for 500 plus years and
Mm,
create this whole identity based on art, culture, right? Like make pyramids everywhere, like create the Louvre, like, the Tate, like MoMA, all these museums. And when we start to get the power, and when other curators like MoCA and Colburn and Shivani start to think different and want to change things, you can't come to us and say, no, 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 the history of this is too bad, we can't use it, right? No, it's up to us now, and it's like you said, Carlos, it's like you now have the power to discover other artists and bring them into this, and MOCA has the power to discover other artists, where it's like at times before that you had to play again, right? You have to. I keep seeing that the term, like a certain thing that keeps coming up is like artists are no longer having to play a certain role to get by as well, right?
Mm. I mean, can I share just an interesting story
Please,
that kind of ties into a lot of this? Um,
please.
it was the summer of 2020. It was in New York City, like massive, BLM protests in the city, and a lot of like whatever it was, like the shops in Soho boarded up their windows, right? And uh, and these protesters were making protest art on these boards. And one of the major institutions to board up their windows was the Whitney Museum. And
Oh,
I was contacted by this guy who he said, like, I need you to come see this. And he had, I mean, it's an incredible story. He was second generation Italian, grew up in Spanish Harlem, and had a pizza food truck, right? And he would park it in front of the Whitney Museum, and he saw the art on walls there, and he saw the Whitney Museum come in with one of those like skill saws and begin to chop up this artwork, right? To throw it away. And he's like, he could not leave it. So he abandoned his business for 2 months, spent every day with a team of 4 people in all the trucks that he had, and went all around New York City and removed these boards and preserved these boards. And I'm telling you, they are like massive, massive, beautiful works of art. And he put them all in like this warehouse in Long Island City. And I just think it's just so incredible for an institution to be so tone deaf to like the moment and like the passion and beauty of like people just like stepping into the streets and taking like the canvas of the city that was provided to them and like conveying their message so directly onto it. And I'll have to share like some of these images with you guys later.
please.
Definitely, please.
Yeah, because it just speaks, I think, very analogous to what is happening all over the world, at a time where there is a lot of like uncertainty, a lot of doubt, a lot of fear, a lot of questioning of like authority and institution, and how have we individuals like given away so much of our power, and how is that being used, but then like how we can also begin to reclaim it, and that like nothing is so institutionalized that it can't be reclaimed by the people. And of course we see this again and again throughout history.
Have you? There's a book by the guy. Is like I just Google it now. Roger Taylor, and it's called "Art and Enemy of the People." And I think it speaks to what you just said. It probably it's not like, I mean, he like Roger Taylor tried to make it like really sensational, like art, the enemy of the people. But I think it's the institutions really, behind art that make art an enemy of the people. And like you just said, and thank God for the Italian guy, that decided to preserve all that art, because the Whitney Museum was not gonna do it,
Right.
and you got me thinking, like even like obviously he doesn't have the or I don't know, he might not have the resources to preserve properly that piece of culture, that you so eloquently explain why it matters. But I think that's also where NFTs can come in, right? Like
Yep.
those make ephemeral art manifestations. I think that's one of the use cases of like crypto art that we haven't explored yet that much, right?
Oh,
Mm-hmm.
you should see the smile that's on my face right now, because like like the archival ability of this tech alone just solves so many problems right?
Mm-hmm.
And like these institutions will give you the excuse your work is not archivable. You're not using professional material, and um, I sort of developed the mentality of through university of fuck you, I'm gonna do it my way regardless. Because if
Mm,
Picasso did it, and we're gonna play these like vague undertone political games, let's play. I'm down, right?
mm,
It's like it's a two-way street. This game is no longer locked to you, right? Once you see the inwards, and when you hear once you hear the teachers talk about it, you realize. And so it's like the archivable nature of this like is insane, because
yeah.
you can no longer destroy art that's important to the people for your political goals, and you
Mm,
can no
Mm-hmm.
longer erase history for the betterment or the destruction of a certain people,
mm,
which art and governments have had a hand in hand doing, right? Art either creates an
Mm-hmm.
identity or destroys an identity based on
mm,
how you portray it, right? And the government, every government loves to use that, right? George Orwell's Ministry of Truth is the biggest like
Mm-hmm.
fictional example, right? Of like a ministry dedicated to just complete and utter propaganda of nation
mm,
building to this sort of corrupt nation, and it utilizes art on all of its fronts. So
Yep.
it, it,
Yep.
it
Yep.
and it destroys art, right? The book burning ceremonies, and like those
Exactly.
those those happen in real life too, right? And so it's just
yeah.
that in itself is and I mean, like, personally, like ISIS can't come in and fucking destroy the
Exactly. Exactly.
anti,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? It's
Yeah.
like that won't happen, right? And then people can't come
Exactly.
into the Amazon and destroy the Mayan and the Aztec and
Right.
right?
Right.
It's
Mm,
Right.
and then
Mm-hmm.
and even in America, right? Like American Native American works as well, and then say 100, well, no, like 1,000 years from now, what we consider to be historical artifacts from this time cannot be destroyed, cannot be
mm,
erased, and cannot be altered, right?
mm.
Definitely. Definitely.
Yeah, I mean, there's no more excuses, right? Because
Yes.
like the physical is scarce, and there's a finite amount of resources, and when you can say like, oh, this is not worth preserving to me because I'm the authority on what deserves to be preserved. Suddenly,
Mm.
you're in like the digital abundance where anything and everything can be captured and preserved, and it's exactly what you were speaking to about earlier, is that we have developed a technology for like cataloging, preservation, provenance that effectively operates rather automatically. There is no like single node that is the protector, keeper, determinant of
Yeah.
whether something deserves or has a right to exist.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Definitely. Imagine like before, like have you heard the story of like Stalin changing the pictures
Oh
and
yeah.
then like taking out taking out like the people like eventually he didn't like, and he killed or he sent to like Siberia and the Gulag. So I mean, it doesn't matter if like the Photoshop version, because obviously it's an
Mm-hmm.
anachronism. It doesn't matter if it got on the blockchain too, but if at least the original one got on the blockchain too, it's
Mm-hmm.
kind of like, oh wait, like I'm able to see what happened here culturally, and there's no way of erasing that from history.
Mm,
And I think that's super super powerful, And the institutions, the financial institutions, they're afraid of like crypto and Bitcoin, and the cultural institutions should be afraid of like crypto art and NFTs, because it's changing the rules of the game. And just coming back to like an individual point of view, even when I decided to tokenize, my first artworks on the Ethereum blockchain, there was nowhere near to the amount of capital that we saw and that we're seeing right now. For me, honestly, it was all about like I don't know if people are gonna care about this technology, but I know what the blockchain means. I know
mm,
what it entails. So for my own mental health, I'm just gonna put this on the blockchain just in case somebody in 100 years discovers this. Because I was in that position of being kind of like, oh, I'm just like a forgotten artist. Like nobody cares about me,
mm,
about what
Mm-hmm.
I have to say. So I and if every artist is gonna tell you that they want to be preserved in history, Like and Freud said that, you know, like art is like embalsamar in English. I think it's embalm. Like when you like the mummies, like the Egyptian mummies, right? Like that's what artists do, and that's he also mentioned. Freud also mentioned that in artists the thanatos, like the death impulse is more present probably than in other people, you know, even though you might think constantly like that artists are always celebrating life. I can attest to that. Like in the back of our minds, we're constantly like, "Oh, you're gonna die. You know, you're gonna die. So you better do what you need to do now. You know, you need to preserve your ideas. You need to preserve your aesthetics. You know, because you're gonna die. So we're constantly having that voice in our mind. So when I tokenize my first NFT was like, I don't care if people see this, if people put value on this, if you know people collect this, but it's my duty as an artist to try to preserve, you know, my passing through this world. You know, and I wish more artists, like the newer artists coming into this space, would have that mentality, right? Instead of just trying to make money.
Oh,
It's
I would.
absolutely.
such a good point, and like I want to speak to a couple of your pieces, Carlo. Like,
Mhm.
because there was such a fun, like playful atmosphere in the beginning. I call it like kids in a sandbox, right? Like kids in the
Mhm.
sandbox. You know, they're all imagination. So like, this is not a weed pipe, right?
Yeah,
Or like,
yeah.
or like decentralized erotic. I think it's called, which
Erotica.
is like,
Yeah.
yeah, which is like a picture of maybe like David's butt, and then it like zooms in and it says like, "Hey, this is also an NFT." And like each time I see that piece, like I love it, and it's funny, so funny, but it's also like very powerful,
Thank you,
right?
man.
Because you reappropriate the symbol and you speak to, you know, your power to one, like recapture that symbol and then like play with it to say like, you know, this is also like an NFT. It is not like the thing that you think it is. It is now this thing because we are
Yeah.
in this new paradigm.
Yeah, yeah. I wish I could go back to that. Like, I completely agree, and I'm getting like even goosebumps when I was hearing you. Like, it was really playful because it was all about that. Like, I knew I had like all these ideas, you know, regarding what all this meant for me as an artist and how it could like change my perception and everyone's perception around what is art, you know, value, all that kind of stuff. And I think I was freer, to be honest, back
Yeah.
then because it was all about it was all about putting that on the blockchain, you know, just for the sake of preserving my fucking crazy ideas. That was it, as simple as that, you know. So, you know, but I can complain. I've done well for myself. Also, now my family's doing well. You know, it all worked out. Yeah, and I think there's kind of like it's interesting because it's like you either like become really playful because you don't care and there's no money around and it's just like just being playful for the sake of being playful. And then you move maybe to where I am right now as a crypto artist, where like I have enough money to say what I want to say. You know,
Yep.
I hope that doesn't come as like as being like arrogant or something. You know,
Oh.
it's just freedom. Like, but if you're kind of like in the middle, I think that's the complicated part. That's a complicated space. You're either just being completely fucking playful with all of this, or you kind of like said, I'm just gonna make money because I know, you know, I'm in a capitalist society, and the only way I can put out whatever the fuck I want to say is by having money, so I don't have to depend on no one. You know, if that makes sense.
But there was a recognition at some point, Carlos, in you where you you learned the lesson for yourself and you made the choice to then go and teach that lesson to other people,
Right.
right?
Right.
So many people will just continue to feed like into the capitalist machine without taking a step back outside themselves and recognizing that responsibility. And we've grown into a space now that there are like leaders such as yourself that have,
You're
you
too
know,
kind.
what I'm not, man. Like this is like this is like we've seen an evolution of people like grow to become like bigger than themselves in choosing to give that gift to other people.
Right.
And
And
if that is not like the gift of life, the gift of like what the art and medium and expression has shown, to keep it all for yourself and to continue to like feed something that is only self-serving instead of to
mhm,
like return, that um is where I begin to like get so excited and happy to see and
mhm,
know that the space is truly in the hands of people who care.
it,
Fuck, you're gonna make me cry for real.
man,
You're
For
gonna
real, man.
for
I feel
real.
it.
But it's
it's
true
Yeah.
because I think back to like the traditional art world, and if you think about it, like how incestuous it is and how small it is. It was kind of like self-serving, and it was like,
mhm,
okay, I somehow was able to move to Paris and like tap into like that small, art world, very elitist. And now I'm inside. It doesn't matter if I come from Latin America or if I come from Africa, but
mhm,
probably once I'm in there, it's kind of like I don't want to lose this. So I have to play by the rules of the people that gave me access to this
Mm,
really, really, really small space. And crypto art is like the other way around. It's like fuck you, fuck it. Like
mm,
let's bring freedom to the most amount of people. So it's kind of like I discover a route to being free,
mhm,
artistically, mentally. And why wouldn't I want that for every other artist in the world? Doesn't matter where you are. Like, yeah, 100%. That's what I want. Because it's like I'm not gonna like, yeah. Like that's it. I'm trying to
look,
mhm,
speak more than I need to. But it's that.
it's the recognition that there is no price for
mhm,
freedom, and
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
to become just a perhaps like a cog of the machine, right,
mhm,
to feed whatever it is. And there are certain artists we know that have always been, just
mhm.
I don't want to like say, but like there are people that just
Yo,
feed
you can
into, yeah, their
talk
ego
your shit.
themselves. And at that point you are not, you are not free. You are beholden to the markets, right?
yeah.
And
It,
uh, that is going to be such a powerful distinction, I think,
mhm,
among people in the future. Like this space was built by artists collecting other artists' work.
Yeah,
Whenever somebody had a big sale, and we're talking about like
yeah,
$1,000 sale, like
yeah,
like
mhm,
that money
yeah.
would flow down and through. And it's a recognition that you do not need like all of the trappings of wealth, all of this
mhm,
extreme capitalism. We know we're like racing towards an unsustainable like future of like consumption and
mhm,
extraction.
Mm-hmm.
We
Mm-hmm.
don't need it. Like we're
We don't.
humans.
Mm-hmm.
We can meet our needs, and we can teach everybody else how to like empower to a point where they are like cared for, fed, sheltered, and happy because they are free.
I
Yeah.
I gotta gas you guys up a little bit right now because what you guys are doing, it reminds me, and what Carlos what you just said before, and Corbin, like you picking up and giving Carlos like his flowers on what he's doing is actually, like, to me, one of the most important things, but also one of the oldest things that we as humans are have been doing culturally, right? I was telling Shivani the story in MTL, in Egyptian mythology, right? Osiris sort of represents the land and Egyptian people and all who inhabit it, right? And he gets sort of chopped up into 12 pieces, thrown around the land, and his wife has to put them together and rebirths him in the afterlife. But he's blind, right? He can't see. And so that sort of represents the people being just blind, governed by corrupt rulers, unable to see, unable to think for themselves, right?
Mm,
And so
Mm-hmm.
Thoth, um, I believe he's a recorder, but also sort of the god of wisdom, gets in a fight with Set, and he's a sort of, like, you can consider him Satan, right? Like the evil god, and he loses one of his eyes. And in his battle to get it back, after he gets it back, he has a decision: do I put my eye back, or do I give it to my father Osiris and make him
mm,
see the underworld again? And he decides, I'm gonna lose my eye and give it to my father and give him the eye, so he's able to see and rule the underworld. And what that means is it's very similar to sort of Jesus carrying the cross, where it's like thus he recognized what he has to do and what, you know, I have to take this burden and sacrifice
Yeah.
of being blind in order to give it to my Father and my God. And in turn, it's those who realize their role within society have a
Mm-hmm.
have the role in making it change by making those who are unblind and unaware blind and aware, right? And you know, you have to do that, and to like give it, to bring it to the Jesus mythos, right? It's like you have to do that by carrying your cross up the hill.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter who gave you the cross and why you have to do it.
Yeah.
If you can do it, you just do it, right? Because
Mm,
it doesn't, and it's like the suffering that you endure now through the process, like if it's creative process, right? Or, you know,
Mm-hmm.
like Carlos, the emotions you felt, you know, creating and not knowing somebody's going to collect your work, or if your work is
Yeah.
going to be
Yeah.
valued. And even Colburn, right? You buying these NFTs and not knowing, is this value going to stick
Mm-hmm.
around, right? And then once it sticks around, you guys, instead of saying, if I'll sell it, make bank and move to an
mm,
island and chill, you decide to build. I need to
Yeah.
sustain this
mm,
for my people behind me. It's important,
Yeah.
right? And it's like, it's what we need to do, and it's what our people have been doing, and it's how we've survived, and it's how we've kept ourselves in check. That's the sort of one of
mm.
the reasons we're still here, right? And it's artists,
Yeah.
sort of those who realize it, you know. It, I mean, like, I have to give you guys your flowers for that, because not a lot of people
Nah.
realize that this actually is the sort of path forward, right? You make the bigger the pot, the more it can eat, and then they make
Mm,
bigger pots, the more can eat,
mm,
right?
Uh, And sometimes I think like I didn't choose crypto art, like it chose me.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously, you know, once, you know, the ball started rolling and people started to like recognize me as like, you know, one of the main voices of crypto art in Latin America. And I, you know, it's been a responsibility, you know, and I think that's the
mm,
cross, you know, like I cannot
mm,
keep the gift just for myself, because I'm just gonna like probably lose it.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes like I gotta be honest, like I'm tired sometimes. Like I'm
yeah.
like even when I was with Metaphysica now, on the space race, I was like, honestly, I'm gonna be completely, you know, honest. It was like, it's okay if I don't get that spot, you know, because then
Mm,
I'll just kind of like just take like this lengthy vacation,
mm,
and you know, and recoup myself and regather my energies, because it's been a wild ride, even though it's
Mm-hmm.
been super satisfactory. You know, and the collectors have like rewarded me, and the space has rewarded me. It's been tiring, you know, like you said, like the
mm,
mental energy, of being constantly creative and not knowing what's gonna happen. That can get one tired. But you know, but then it got in, and I'm
Mm-hmm.
like, fuck, man, like get ready, you know, the this thing is gonna continue, you know. I
mm,
don't know, meditate, eat better, go to the gym, but this is the cross, like you were saying, this is the cross you gotta carry it, you know. It's not all about yourself. And then I started like getting a lot of messages from Latin American artists, and they were like, dude, we're behind you, come on, let's do this, let's go. And I'm
yeah.
like, if they only knew how tired I am, you know,
Yeah.
like I'm really grateful. But then it's like I agree. I like we I yeah we're gonna just keep going, and I'm probably sure it's the same for Colborn. It's been some time.
Mm-hmm.
It's been, you know, constant. And sometimes you just switch to like I just want to disconnect, and then you realize that you have to keep building. And like you
Mm,
were
Mm-hmm.
saying, we could have like oh, you know what, forget it. I'm just gonna go to an island and chill.
Mm-hmm.
But I think Colburn and I are just kind of like we're not that kind of person. I think,
yeah.
you know.
Yeah.
Hmm.
No, I mean, I tell everybody, yeah, they ask you, how are you? Like, I'm tired. Yeah. Like, but you know, like and I think like you can hear it. Like, I have so much energy for this
Yeah.
because who knows, right? Like, it could all disappear tomorrow. Like, you take nothing for granted, right? You take
Hmm.
nothing for granted, and like, I I I just like believe so much, and it must have been hard for you too. Like, it was hard to see like the baby, the child, the thing that you poured and loved and so much, like, begin to grow up and change,
Yeah.
right? And you recognize that perhaps it's like it isn't your own anymore, but it is a thing that is becoming.
Yeah,
So
100%.
so
Yeah,
like, and ultimately, like, you have to accept that the thing must become, and you can be there to like give guidance and wisdom, and express
hmm
your viewpoints. And
hmm
this is I am not a parent, but I imagine this is exactly the same experience of what it is like to have and care and love for a child, and
yeah,
to see them make mistakes, or to see them not listen to or do different things. And
yeah,
but at the end of the day, like, you love the thing, and you have infinite energy for the thing and its own being and becoming, and in that acceptance, like, you only become more yourself.
right. I completely agree. The only thing I would probably like change if like it's not gonna become something. I actually feel like, I mean, speaking like in philosophical terms, I at least I hope so, like crypto art, it's always becoming, right, instead of
Right,
like settling in stone, because then we would like be
right,
just like any art movement and any other, I would hope that it's becoming for at least for like 20, 25, 50 years, I don't know. And that's why I appreciate like the love, Colborn, that you have for the space, and kind of like the I don't know, to if I should call them like critiques, or like you're very aware of what's happened and what's been happening, and I really appreciate. I probably, I've never said that to you, but from like some point onward, I've seen you become much more, I'm not gonna say protective, right? Because then that would be kind of like really parental, like, oh, this is mine, and I want it to for it to become whatever I want it to be. But I've seen you kind of like, yeah, become much more aware, and keep kind of like that ethos that we had in the beginning. And I wanted to say to you that I really appreciate that. Basically, yeah,
thank you.
a lot,
I
yeah,
mean,
yeah.
there was obviously a breaking point and a split in the evolution of the museum, where uh it had to be one way or the other.
Mm,
And uh when I rewrote the manifesto for the new museum, it was that it would be a place of constant change. It would reject its own stasis, right?
yeah, yeah.
For me, it was my collection. You see, it is about like depth and breadth of the space. And I was speaking with Art Gnome, Jason Bailey, and like, he would rather, and this is how I felt in the beginning, he would rather spend, give $200 to 20 artists than, $4,000 to one artist. Because it's the start of that journey. It's the spark, and whatever happens like afterwards is, um, you just can never recreate that spark, right? And then, if you are in perhaps like an artist market and like pushing values and just playing market games, well, that it speaks to something different about like,
Absolutely.
the character and person in the collection, and what it all means perhaps for them. I mean, a collection of art is like the most incredibly personal thing that you could begin to do. And I had like very much lost who I was at the beginning of this journey, but I refound what I cared about and what I was passionate about
Mm,
through the artwork and the artists and the voices, because they were able to see and translate back to me something that was so far out there. But it was initially the same like spark and inspiration that caught me in early 2017 about what this could be and what this could become. But I had was in more of like an investment advisor and like doing deals in the space, and that was incredibly draining because it became so number go up forward that we had lost the original intent. And I refound that spark with the artists and the artwork. And now okay, this goes way back to the beginning of what we were talking about, but there was a word I learned recently. It's called hyperstitional, right? And it's the opposite of superstitional, right? So
mm,
superstition is like you step on a crack, you break your mother's back, like like something that is happening in the present that will become in the future. This is the opposite. This is taking that thing from the future and bringing it to the present and becoming that thing in the present so that it is achieved in the future, right?
I know another word for that. It's a French philosopher. What's his name? It's a futur anterior. It's a future in the past. It's a beautiful. It's the same thing. I didn't know like there was like another term to explain that. Yeah. So it's kind
Yeah.
of like you know what's gonna like you whatever you want to happen in the future. For example like taking care of the climate or that. I mean that battle is actually going on right now. So but he says like you have to think of like the worst case scenario. Like that future that you don't want already happened. So you're here back in the present trying to fight against that future, if that makes sense.
Mm.
So,
It does. Like it's so
mhm,
like in the own process of my becoming and not wanting to be this like financial person, like
mhm,
I assumed the identity of
exactly.
the museum,
Yeah.
right? And then became that thing. And then as I was becoming that thing, that future idea was informing what I was becoming until suddenly I was not, the person that I was, but I had actually become the thing that I had just like begun to put an idea or label around, and that speaks to like the flexibility of identity in a metaverse environment and the presentation of the true self so that people cannot presume anything about you based on like gender, sex, creed, religious orientation, whatever that box is that people might judge you for or put an assumption behind. No, suddenly you are in charge of the identity that you choose to perceive and the work that you put forward, and you become that in the present by
Yeah.
pulling it from the future. It's an
That's
interesting
beautiful.
concept. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Go
I
ahead, and
No, I was just gonna say, like I've heard of a lot of people in the space will throw around the word manifest. Like I like to manifest this or manifest that, and to me, one like the biggest thing is like if you have vision and you again to Colburn to your point, if you can sort of not even like try to predict the future or see the future or how you want it to be, you already know where you want to go, and you already
Mm.
have certain steps, and you see which ladders sort of need to be climbed. Now the ladders might be different when you get to them, right? The ladders might change depending on the time you get there, but you get a sort of vision of what sort of needs to be done. And the weird thing to me is like you don't realize you're doing it after some time. You're like, oh, okay, I hope I get it, and then it's like, oh, I'm there. And then it's like
Yeah.
the next ladder is there. It's like, oh, you don't realize that you're crossing the ladder when you get to it. I That's also interesting to me. And the other point, it's like the identity that are being built here. It's to me, it's like I play a lot of video games, and so it's like somewhat there's like a cyberpunkish element that excites me to it, but it's also it's as if like eh, people now have like, and you guys are sort of creating the lore of sort of the artistic future that we're about to enter, right? And it's like those who want to know where they want to be will get themselves there, and then that becomes your position, right? And it's like it's to me, it's like I look forward also to like how this space like views you guys' work in 100 years, right? Because it's like you guys have a vision, right? And you aim to achieve it, and you're still working on it, right? And so it's like how this space is going to look at that in 100 years. It's also going to be interesting. Um,
And I'm
because you,
constantly thinking
mm,
about it. At least lately, after like seeing like how much of like a buzzword the whole idea of the metaverse has become. It's kind of like that's gonna happen. Like I even like just like 8 months ago, I was like, what are we doing here? Like this is just
mm,
we're just like a bunch of crazy people in here. But I like it's not completely necessary to have like the acknowledgement of like these other big companies, but it's telling you something. We should be able to read, the whole cultural, technological panorama. right? And it's like, no, dude, this is gonna happen. Like this is happening. So in 50 years, 80 years, like people are just, they're gonna revisit whatever we built here and like the basis for that world that they're gonna like inhabit. So it's crazy to think in those terms, I
Mm-hmm.
try not to do it, constantly, because then I just get
Mm,
lost in these ideas of how the future is gonna be. But it's fun, and it's motivating. And the other thing I wanted to say is like the idea, like Colborn said, of like the constant revolution, like the revolution inside of the revolution. I think that's something that I'm really excited about, like hearing people talk in those terms, because I think that's the worst thing that can happen to any revolution. It's like it gets institutionalized, and
Mm-hmm.
that's where
mm,
and then it dies, right? And then it
mm,
dies.
Oh.
And then it becomes the opposite of what it was trying to do. We saw it, with the Soviets in Russia. We saw it in Cuba, right? So I'm really excited to be sharing this with people that have that mindset. Like
yeah.
it's all about becoming. Like I'm pretty
Mm-hmm.
sure, like in 6 months, Colburn is gonna say, do you remember the guy from the interview 6 months ago? I'm not that guy anymore. I'm not that person anymore. So I'm here to tell you about what's going on. Like who's the new Colburn? And I'm really excited about that. Because if
Yeah.
we I don't yeah, definitely super excited about that, because it means this has like a true future, you know.
Right.
Yeah.
Mm.
Go ahead, please.
I was just gonna say, like, to your point of the revolution, it's like I noticed this when I came to Canada, where it was like people were asking their jobs for days off to go protest, and I was like, what do you mean? You're asking your job to go protest? Like
Mm,
in Egypt, we didn't ask shit. We just went. Like my
Mhm.
mom was like, my mom woke me up and she was like, "Me and your dad, we're going. Let's go." And I was like, "Okay, let's go." I
Right.
want to, right? And then
amazing.
it's like and then here, like to hear that people is like, "Yeah, we're gonna go march. We got to get a police order to escort us." And I'm like, "What? What if you're protesting the police? They gotta be there." Like, what do you mean? What?
You know what, my wife lived in Toronto
Mm,
so many years ago, and she always tells me, because in Mexico here it's the same story like in Egypt. Like you don't ask permission, you just go
mm-hmm,
and fucking protest. And she told me, she always tells me the story, like when she saw like the first protest in Toronto, like people were in the sidewalks, right? And they didn't protest in the street, like. And she was like, what's this, like, what's going on? So yeah, you can have the revolution being institutionalized, and people don't see how they're kind of like playing the game that the institutions and the government wants them to play. And I think that's the beauty here with like what Colburn was saying, of like the constant revolution. Like he didn't like where the Museum of Crypto Art was trying to settle, right? Like what it was trying to become. I think the what makes Colburn the special person he is precisely that he said, no, this is always gonna be becoming something, and I'm not quite
Mm,
sure what it's gonna be, but I'm not gonna settle into this idea, right?
mm,
And solidify myself into this idea of what MOCA is gonna be. So I think that's what makes this so special, And it's decentralized, it's permissionless. We don't need to ask permission to nobody, you know.
mm.
So we have a future. We have a fucking future.
Yeah. I get brought back to your Hong Kong protester piece, right? Because you
Yeah.
had to be obviously aware of the power of that moment to immortalize that figure,
mm-hmm,
right?
Right.
That faceless figure, but that individual as one. And like a question I wanted to ask you is, and something that I think was transformative for me as well, is that I would imagine in the beginning, like in a space where not many artists were taking their name, like you took your name,
hmm hmm
right? And
Yeah.
for not many people know this about me, but like for the first 4, 5, 6 months, like I was collecting under the pseudonym of Codeine Cups, right? And there was a
oh,
there was a choice where
mm,
there were very few, if any, collectors like using their names to to be me. Like, this is not a pseudonym. No, like, this is obviously, this needs to be me. And I think we're increasingly seeing people
Mm.
like feel comfortable beginning to whatever it is, like dox themselves or like take the identity and ownership of 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 their action as themselves. And for me, that is super cool and powerful. But of course, it should always be like the choice of that individual to do that,
Mm.
because you will never know like the circumstances under which that exists, and to also
Right.
have the power to have that shield of a pseudonym is incredibly important and cool.
Right. I agree. Like it all depends on your context, right? Like if you're in a situation where it can be like kind of like a life or death situation, like just go ahead. Like like that's like Satoshi Nakamoto. I mean, those
Right.
people or she, like they knew, like they were very
Mhm.
political. I mean, they knew what could happen if they were out there in public. Um, Maybe I decided to, like, from the beginning just be myself, and it might be like subconsciously kind of like that attitude that I've, or like political attitude, like there are certain things that need a face and that need a name and that need a leader, even
Right.
though like I later on kind of like sometimes I haven't I wish I had to like use a pseudonym, and just get off the hook and make it disappear and nobody would. But I think subconsciously it's that political idea of, like, these kind of movements at some point they need a face and they need a real
Mhm.
name and they need to be a little bit more tangible, so people are not so afraid. That might be like why I decided. I'm not sure. I would have to like meditate a little bit more. But
Yeah.
Well, it
mhm.
it well also like just knowing who you guys are drives others to motivate. Like it motivates them to create, right? I mean,
Yeah.
like Ai Weiwei, for example, his studio is destroyed in China. The man has been imprisoned in China, tortured
Nice.
probably, right? And he still chose to actively produce work. And when he got the chance to leave, he left and still produced work, right? And now he wrote a book, and it's a book essentially. It's like, I think it's a biographical book, but its whole aim was, if something happens to me, right, it's for my child, right? And
Yeah.
to both of you guys' point is like the archivability of this is like, if something ever happens to us, this can be for our people and our children and
Yeah.
Right.
the future generations unchanged, right? And
Yeah.
and also, like the pseudonym is important, right? But those who can adopt a face, right, or can who those who are able and are willing to take the risk in this early adoption, to reveal themselves, it needs to be rewarded, because, and it needs to be congratulated, because it's like, I mean, if we knew Satoshi Nakamoto, like who he was, the CIA would have got his ass like 10 years
Oh,
ago.
definitely. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. I
Right.
mean, I'm also kind of like I knew early on that the blockchain is like this immutable ledger that, as long as we have some resemblance of like the civilization that we have now, it's just gonna like keep on existing.
Mm.
And I have kids, and it was like,
Mm.
if for some reason I become famous, or I become someone through this, I want for my kids to be able to kind of like say that's my dad, like I'm
Mhm.
Mm.
I'm gonna keep
Mm.
on like that name, that the martial tradition. I'm gonna
Mm.
keep on pushing that forward, hopefully. I'm not putting any pressure on my kids. They can do whatever the fuck they want to do, as long as they don't hurt anyone. Right.
Yeah.
But I thought about that too, kind of like, oh, if I struck gold, metaphorically speaking, through
Mhm.
this, I want them to be able to reclaim that, and say we're
Mm.
Marcial and my dad is that dude, and it's gonna live on the blockchain, maybe.
Mm.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I,
But
Gosh, it's insane, you guys. It's insane.
This has been a really good conversation.
Yeah.
I'm just looking
Coming,
forward.
Carlos. I'm coming to Mexico City. Obviously,
Dude,
you know.
dude, 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 dude. Mi casa es tu casa. I just want to have the same conversation with you, but
Yeah,
with some mezcal on the table. And
yeah,
see where it
exactly,
Oh.
takes us.
exactly. We'll put the bottle in front and we go and chill.
Exactly. Until it's
Like,
gone. Until it's
yeah,
Please,
gone.
please
the
Yeah,
record
next
that.
yeah.
mold, the
Please
next
record
Yeah.
mold.
that.
Excellent. Super honored. Like this been like more than I ever expected out of life. To be
Yeah,
able to like fuck the money, fuck whatever
yeah,
little fame, in this little NFT world I've been able to get. It's been this conversations, these
yeah,
connections. Like yeah, it for me at least, it's all about that. Like there's been a lot of time before like getting into this that I didn't know who I was, what I was gonna like, bring into the world, what was my contribution, that I felt alone, that I felt, by myself,
yeah,
and being able to, connect with people from all over the world,
yeah,
at this fucking level,
yeah,
dude, that's it,
yeah.
That's
There's hope,
fucking it.
right? That's hope.
Let's hope. Yeah, yeah,
Like
yeah, yeah, yeah,
because
yeah.
I was that same person,
Mhm.
man, and I think
Mm-hmm.
that's a thread that ties a lot of people who were very early to this space. Is like we found each other and we found a home and we found like family with one another, and there is like a love that persists and that connection that we feel across the world that
Yeah.
speaks to like the hope of
Mhm.
what we will be, and even like the power to share and express these things and know that like whatever happens, like we're safe, and
Mm-hmm.
there is
Mhm.
legacy that is permanent and immutable, and like the energy that was expended was not wasted.
Mhm.
Definitely not. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
I mean, I usually I tend to I say to people like, I mean, I survived like the lockdowns, and
Mhm.
with the kids here, like there's been plenty of time where I thought I was gonna go mad, crazy, right? Like,
right.
oh, this is too much. And I'm not a religious guy. I'm sort of like spiritual. I like to experiment with some psychedelic plants now and then to tap into like that spiritual world.
Yeah,
And I say to people like, spiritually speaking, which is crazy because when you think about how abstract like crypto art is and crypto in general is, but it was like that early community, right? Like you were saying, like it saved me. It saved my soul in
yeah,
one of like the most soul crushing moments in recent history. You
yeah,
know,
yeah,
so yeah, there's a lot of love, and I hope that thread keeps on going through the future. But I don't know what's gonna happen, but I still have that feeling, like the that movie by DiCaprio when he was really
Mhm.
young, The Beach. Like they had like this really like moment where they built this commune, and then
yeah,
afterwards they just kind of
Mhm.
communicated and they remember what they lived. I just hope at least this is kind of like the worst case scenario, right? Where I'm like in 5 years just meeting, once in a while with you guys to have
Mhm.
a drink and just like remember, like the good
yeah.
moments, at least. But that's the worst case scenario. I'm hoping that in 5 years, we're doing bigger stuff, and changing more people's lives, with all of this.
Yeah.
Hopefully.
That's what I hope too, right? My prayer for crypto art is that the people who still come in, like again, like fuck the money. A lot of people were promised like streets paved with gold, and maybe they're not selling, but maybe they
Mhm.
actually do still feel like the love and the support, and that was obviously like the lesson that
Mhm.
Rhyolites taught me, right? Like this
Rest in
guy,
power. Yep.
yeah, rest in power to
Yeah.
he was a community builder, and like it did not matter who you were, what you were, like we came to each other with questions, and we were like walking through the dark together, and we were feeling around the walls, and we were seeing what was, and I just you know and during the pandemic, of course, when people were like scared and frightened and uncertain, and people were losing jobs, and the world was changing, and to know at the end of the day that there is some like sense of humanity, and also like again why I love somebody like Max Osiris,
Mhm.
because that is somebody that is just so out there on the edge, like trusting perhaps in other people also at times to take care of him. But like, when he was given the hundreds of thousands of dollars that he was given in the Rari drop, like, he went to Las Vegas and, he did all
Yeah,
the drugs, but like, what did he
yeah.
do? Like, he spent the money on other
Right,
people's
right.
artwork to tell them that they were valuable, and that he
Exactly,
saw them, and
exactly.
that he recognized them, and that he didn't need the money, um, because I don't. It's and that the extreme power of that
Mhm.
is, it's like such a beautiful moment in the history, and I guess like people still can like feel and sense that, and and it's hard because I know there's a lot of artists that are frustrated with like lack of sales or whatever it is, but hopefully we are able to like take care of each other and recognize the people. And there's amazing stories too, like Godfrey Murphy, Boombox Head.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Um, I was just with IRL Arts, Annie, like,
Annie,
and
yeah,
yeah, like these are
yeah.
just like heroes and beautiful people that care
Oh,
for
yeah.
other people and care for artists. Um, so
I I
yeah,
th- I think that's a really important point. In a lot of the artist talks that I had, and even the Twitter Spaces that I've been on, I try to tell people, like, to be weary of the market and to grow their community, because I'm where you guys are, say 2 years back, right, where I had entered the space and didn't see the money, with the promise of money first, right? But then you get bit by a bug, and then the
Mhm.
community
yeah,
the community grows on you, and then it doesn't matter if the sales are slow, right? And my point is, like, you as people, you also have to like be honest with yourself, right? In recognition of, why am I here? Am I here for the tech, and am I here for building? And if you are here, then the sales themselves, like, yeah, they'll bother you, and like the struggles will bother you, but there is a bigger picture that you're working towards, right? And there's a bigger picture that I'm working towards on, and it's
mm,
I make it a point, like, right, to like recognize, um like, the how the space is, right? Because like people love, we see this all the time, the space loves to celebrate wins, and doesn't celebrate any fails. We barely hear about the fails, right? They'll vilify somebody if they get caught, but we won't see how much money they've lost and all of that. And in a sense, also, there's a lot of envy and a lot of jealousy and a lot of tension rampant within the space that is so sort of like one-sided in its celebrations and in its sort of like get-togethers, right? And one of the biggest things that has helped solve that stress, right, was the community. Because it's like, I personally haven't made a sale above an ETH or a point one ETH or like like six. Like, well, I've never made a sale above an ETH ever, or an ETH, and I've never made a sale above one ETH for a bit. But the the thing that got me and that keeps me going is the community and the technological advancements. And look where I am now. I'm
yeah,
talking to you guys, right? Like,
Thank you.
I remember when I joined the space and seeing Mocha's Twitter account, and seeing Carlos, like, your account, and thinking like, would I ever be able to talk to you guys, right? Because
Also,
in university they teach you, like, you hear about these artists as like these fine artists, and professors will tell you, go make money, artists make money, but then they portray these artists as untouchable, not human, right? And Colburn, to your point, you've been tweeting about this on Twitter, right? Like, compassion is going to take us a
mm,
long way forward, and compassion is a big part of the community, right? Because like COVID has been one of the hardest things for all of us, and this
mhm.
space has been sort of my foundation based on that, right? It's like, I mean, Carlos, I imagine you've had like struggles with COVID, especially in Mexico, right? And Colburn,
Mhm.
like, COVID in itself, just regardless of where you are, being locked down and restrictions are not fun, right? And then
They're not.
I had that, and then I just happened to graduate my last few semesters through Zoom, and that's when you realize, oh fuck, this is
Yeah.
YouTube University, and I got my piece of paper, and I was like, I paid all this much money for this piece
Yeah.
of paper, right? And it's like I felt lost completely. Like Carlos, to your point, I was like, fuck, what do I
Hmm.
do with my life? I
Hmm.
moved here, and I've been fed this artistic lie. This world, this fine art world has no place for me, right? And then comes the space, and then the community is like is one of the biggest thing that has kept it moving forward as well. Because when the sales dry up, that's when people legitimately start to build, and
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
that's what sort of resumes, like, and once when the pump comes or whatever, like, we celebrate together with our friends and we share the wealth, and then when it slows down, let's build all over again. Time to
Yeah.
advance.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And I think the other cool thing, just like I don't want to be too prosaic, but I mean we need to be able to resolve our economic problems and our material problems. And I think the interesting thing is like once you get into crypto art, and I've been like talking a lot about this with Latin American artists. It's like you get whatever sales you get. It doesn't matter. 1 ETH, 0.5 ETH. But with like DeFi or CeFi or all these kind of
Mm-hmm.
like platforms, you can like be very disciplined and be very logical and say, what, I'm just gonna save up to this point. Like I calculated not long ago, at
Mm-hmm.
least in like Mexican terms, like how much money would you need to make passively? Like how much money would you need to invest, into
Mm-hmm.
some of like these CFI or DeFi platforms to be able to get enough passive income in a
Mm.
country like Mexico to free yourself and free your hands to completely dedicate yourself to building. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
doesn't matter. It might be your art. It might be like learning new skills. Just like myself, right now, I decided to learn JavaScript and learn how to code and
Wow.
generative
Yeah,
art.
that's wild.
And that. So I got to the point where I'm saying, what? It's time for me to start learning new things and new skills. And you don't have to have made the sales that I've made. Like I've
Mm-hmm.
calculated. At least if you're in a country like myself, obviously, if you're in Canada, if you're in the States, if you're in the UK, you need to like be able to save a little bit more in ETH, right? To be able
Mm-hmm.
to get to that point, but it's doable. It's
Mm-hmm.
doable. You're already like selling. You're getting those
Exactly.
1 ETH sales, and so if you just like decide, oh, let me see how I can make some passive income, like that's the next step. Like you free yourself up. You're not constantly thinking about the sales. You're just
Mm-hmm.
making
Mm.
art because you want to make art. You're just putting the NFTs on the blockchain because you want to preserve your
Mm-hmm.
artistry for future generations. Like you get that monkey off your back, but you have to
Mm.
be able to like save up and be disciplined with finance and money.
Mm-hmm. And
Mm-hmm.
even to that point, like, I realized this, doors open up rather quickly the longer you stay in the space.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, it was, because like when sales dry, it can appear like a brutal market, but people are paying attention, and if you're good at what you do, right, and you stay, you can either go the route of create something, right? And I was like, I realized, I was like, okay, I'm bored. I'm not gonna sit here on Twitter and chill my shit 24 hours, like 24/7. I need to do something else. And then I realized, artist talks. Why not? We're not getting the same level of creative, artistic talks that I was getting in university, and those would get too boring, right? And so I just like, let's talk to artists. Like, people, we need to record the conversations, right? Like, so many artists will love to sit and fantasize about, um Salon of the Rejects, or Salon of the Refused, and the Impressionist
Mm.
movement, right? Because like, I wish I was there to hear what they were discussing, and it's like, well, now we can, so let's do it, right? And then
Yeah.
the doors have opened up, and it's like, I've gotten, just like through like myself, like I've gotten to talk to so many artists that I've never gotten to talk to unless I was in a university setting or still trying to be around that. And I was just like, oh, this is crazy, right? And I also tell anybody who joins, I'm like, don't look at the money, look at the community,
Yeah.
and look at the tech, because that's what's gonna bite you. Like, the sale is nice, the first sale is always nice, but it's like, once you realize what this tech is actually doing, it's a completely different game. It's
I
not
was thinking
even the
about
money
that.
game.
Yeah, I think one, you have to realize that like the algorithm is programmed to be your enemy.
Mhm.
You know, like all of these capitalist things are really just designed to make you feel less so that you like consume to try and make up for that. And Carlos will be, I would imagine, the first to tell you that like none of these artists in the beginning were creating for sales because
Mhm.
sales didn't exist. And you know,
Mhm.
like when I jumped on a platform like Super in the beginning, maybe 10-20% of the artwork that was there was sold.
I
And now
agree.
I would imagine it's probably like 80 or 90% of the artwork that's on there is sold.
Mhm.
So it is going to go through these big, like irrational waves in the beginning, but it is about persistence. It is
Mhm.
about like connecting, I would imagine, first and foremost with other artists and exploring your craft and exploring your practice with them. And like me as a collector, like my biggest signal is always when another artist collects an artist's work,
Mhm.
right? Because I have no knowledge of the tool set that's used or required. But if another artist can like validate that for me, like, you know, people after I bought something I liked, people would come to me like, oh, did you know this is like stock this or this or this? I'm like, of course I had like no idea.
Mhm.
Um, and it doesn't bother me like because it still spoke to me.
Mhm.
But that will be like I think your biggest indicator to and it's and then this is why I think again it is a responsibility of artists to like not only pass down like information or and I would imagine Carlos is also probably like completely self-taught in DeFi. Like
Mhm.
one, you have to be a curious individual. Like two, you know, you have to like share and put back into the system like into things that you care about and are important because that is the lifeblood and that is what informs like the collectors of like what the other artists think is valuable and emergent and up and coming. And I've learned again like more from the artists about the art in the space, of course, than I would like following any like big or major collector or like the alpha is the artist, if that makes sense. You know, don't
Mhm.
follow what the market is doing, follow what the
I
artists are doing
I
because they are
agree.
the
Hmm.
ones pulling the space forward.
I agree, and like I noticed where it's like I go through artists' collections. Like you stated this in the MTL talk, where you
Yeah.
know artists collect. Like you go to other artists, and it's like I noticed within myself, and Carlos, to one of your earlier points where where you get to collect and discover artists, where it's like I'm going through artists who have become collectors in their own right, and I'm going through their
Hmm.
collection to validate
Hmm.
certain art if I like it or not, and also to discover new artists. Because if I like your art, we probably like some other art down the line, you know.
Right.
Yeah.
And so, and the power of that as well, that you know somebody like Carlos and somebody like you can become a curator and an artist at the same time, right?
Mm.
To those listening, I'm dropping alpha. Yes, Colburn is an artist. I own One Piece. You sent it to me. Thank you, sir. I still look at that and smile like, oh, but it's
Thank you,
like
man. Yeah.
you guys are collectors, and it's like museums like legitimately would hate if their artists became collectors, because we're gonna take
Mhm.
the shit from them and we're gonna
Mm.
take their money from them, and now we got royalties as well, so we're gonna take so much money from
Yeah.
them, right? And
I mean,
so
it just happened to me like very recently. It's the very first time that
mhm,
that's happened to me that I discovered. Well, I saw the art. This 3D artist is a
mhm,
Brazilian guy. I think he lives in the States, in the West Coast, if I'm not mistaken. And he had minted a lot of like not a lot, but he had minted work like 7 8 months ago. I couldn't find him on Twitter, so that's maybe because it's really good work. But you know, he had only sold maybe one, like 8 months ago, and
mhm,
he put out a couple more NFTs, and maybe he didn't sell them, so maybe he just got disappointed, and didn't mint anymore. And I decided to buy one of his works. Next day, there was this collector putting bid on the other
mhm,
three available NFTs.
Yeah. Yeah.
I
Yeah.
was like, wow, what's this? Was it
Yeah.
me? Like that's
mhm.
crazy. Hmm. That's
somebody
crazy. So,
Somebody's watching. Somebody's wallet watching you guys.
I mean,
Yeah,
everybody is watching everything at every
Yeah,
time,
it's
and that's
true.
the beauty of
exactly.
the transparency, right?
Exactly.
Mhm.
Exactly. Definitely, definitely. So, and I think the other thing is like my thesis right now. It's like culture tends to like reward eventually. It might not be immediately, but I
Mhm.
think culture culture tends to like reward the people that are not in for like that their first reason to be somewhere, it's not the money,
Mhm.
like the fact that a lot of us didn't get into this because of the money. It's interesting, like think about ex copies.
Yeah,
Mhm.
That's an
exactly, exactly.
example. Like he didn't care, like he just wanted to get, you know, his fucking amazing crazy gifts out there. Like he has, like you can tell, like I've talked to the guy through through Zoom. He's
Mhm.
like the nicest person, super open. He's super funny. He's like a big heart, you know, that guy. Even though like you see his art and you might think he's like this crazy guy, you know. No, it's like the opposite. You know, that guy is pure heart. Like I love that guy. Um, or girl, I don't know, man. I already talked a little bit of him. So I think he's the best example, man. Like you can
Yeah.
tell, you know, like that he didn't care. Like it wasn't all about the money. It wasn't about the money. And then culture finds a really strange way of rewarding
Mhm.
those people. You know,
Yeah,
so I think you have to come in with that perspective. You know,
Mhm.
I'm gonna be here for the tech, the community, you know, the nice conversations, the deep, meaningful conversation, and you know, and if money finds me, like Picasso said, let it find me working, you know, and
Mhm.
having these conversations, you know. hmm
the most expensive art in the space, generally in the beginning, was given away for free.
Yep.
Exactly. Now you have like the lost Robbies, right? Like
Yeah, I mean,
that.
look, that stuff was claimed. Like the CryptoPunks was claimed.
Exactly.
Like, you know, the trash artist sold for what, like $5 each. You know, even
Yeah.
X
Yeah.
Copy in the beginning, he couldn't give his stuff away for free.
Mhm.
Exactly.
That
Exactly. Yeah.
that to
Yeah.
me is still crazy. I still like seeing those that Tumblr post that he tweeted. I almost fell off my chair because I was like, I understand why his stuff wasn't selling, but to see the influence that X Copy has created stylistically alone in the space now,
Yeah,
I'm like, oh my god. Like the man was messaging Beeple telling him about NFTs and Beeple wasn't responding.
yeah,
Yeah. Dude,
yeah,
myself, like when I was in Denver in 2020, I had to convince somebody to buy one of the two NFTs that people gave permission to, like Annie, to like IRL art,
yeah.
Mhm.
and her crew to tokenize for that event. I had to explain to somebody, you know, dude, get it. I mean, I wish I had get it, but I had other priorities. I was gonna buy a fucking VR headset that I wanted, you know. Um,
Yeah,
but I, you know, that's the thing. I had to explain somebody, and he was like, "Dude, $200? Maybe that's too much."
yeah,
Okay, this is
yeah,
true story. This is true
yeah,
story. There you go. There
yeah,
you go. There you go. There you go.
Mhm.
Like that's why culture
Mhm.
ends up rewarding those persons.
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
It's
Mm-hmm.
true.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
Gentlemen.
shout
Mhm.
out Andy who minted the first Beeple work.
Exactly. Yep. Yep. Yep.
Super cool.
And also,
Definitely.
like, shout out to Beeple, right? Because Beeple, like, was creating for so long and he was sort of typecast as, like, this weird artist that, you could get for, like, funky CGI works or he would do freelance stuff. And, I mean, like, I have some, like, I like Beeple's work, but it's not, like, it's not something that I personally would buy. But the space has found a way to, again, to your point, to reward those who or just working, who aren't looking for a reward but deserve, their due. And he just got given it, right? X Copy just given it. You got given it. COLBORN, you're getting given it for your belief in the space, right? Again, it's the earlier point of persistence. You have to persist and
Yep.
you know what you're working towards because that usually is what leads the way and brings everything else that's extra later.
Exactly. Guys, I don't have too much time
Oh,
on my
No,
well,
hand.
let's I got to eat something too.
yeah, I
So
was gonna
Okay.
say Gentlemen, we've been talking for 2 hours now, like
Thank you.
and 1 hour and 59 minutes, and so I thank you guys for doing this. This was legitimately great. When I saw you guys talking and I asked the question, and you guys were like, "We want to do it," I was like, I need to set this up. This needs to happen. Um, we need to know how.
This has to be one of the best conversations ever I've had inside, crypto art. You guys are both
Mashallah,
like,
man.
oh, like
Mashallah. Yeah.
definitely. And also, I'm super thankful, super thankful. Like,
Likewise.
I just wanna do this with the mezcal bottle at the Dos Equis. All right.
I'm coming to you, man. Yeah.
Okay. Perfect,
please,
man.
Yeah.
Perfect, man.
please record that.
Love you guys. Love you. Much love.
Love
I
you too.
love you,
Likewise.
man. Love you, man.
Yeah. Love you too.
Both of you guys' links to your MOCA and your Twitters are gonna be in the description. So those listening, go follow them. Go buy Carlos's art and bid on it, and then go interact with MOCA. Go
Thank
look
you.
at their art. Read the library over there. They actually have some really nice readings. Y'all had I think Foucault on there. I didn't expect Foucault to make it to the Museum of Crypto Art. I was
Yeah.
like, damn. So
Yeah. It was a random grab of philosophy that spoke to me. It's all part of my journey,
jeez.
right? So yeah.
You're making my art history teachers jealous right now, I swear. But again, thank you guys for coming and doing this. This was great. And to those listening, go follow them. Go do your thing. Go buy the art, and I will see you guys in the next one. Bye.
Thank you.